Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the For Marketers. So as you can see, we're on Zoom today and we're trying a different platform, but we'll still be as talkative and collaborative as ever. So in this episode, we're going to be discussing a very important marketing topic, and it is the difference between, or the balance between, ROI and brand awareness. It's a common thing that marketers come up against, especially when they come to justifying brand awareness and their marketing campaigns around this. And so we're going to discuss this at length over the next 10-15 minutes. So my name is Christopher Malotti. I'm the CEO and founder of Malotti Media, and we are a copywriting and content marketing agency. I'll throw to Kristen.
Hi, my name's Kristen Hancock. I'm from Font and Swatch Branding and Design Studio, and we create profound brands for mid-market Australia.
Ariel, do you want to jump in? Sorry.
Hi, I'm Ariel Peters. I am the founder and creative director of Two Giraffes. We are a full-service video and animation studio.
Perfect. And Mike?
I'm Mike Sandys, Managing Director of Oddball Marketing. We're an action-orientated full-service marketing agency.
Perfect. And there you have your four marketers. All right, team. So let's discuss brand awareness. It's the bread and butter of marketing, but with this growing focus on ROI and making sure that we are equating our initiatives with dollar in, dollar out, let's discuss how we can sort of make this a reality and what we can do. So maybe we should sort of start with branding and branding essence. And I think that that's probably best to start with Kristen, and then we'll move around the room.
Yeah. Look, I think this is always a conundrum that everybody faces when they're doing digital media, isn't it? Should I build brand awareness? Should I spend money on doing storytelling? Should I extend out to attract new clientele, but build up a relationship and an engagement with them over time? Or do I just do a campaign and push hard on a campaign, make it a really engaging campaign and try and get, whatever the result is out of that? We're in a branding camp, so our view is very much that long-term trends and long-term building up your awareness and engaging the customer with your story and the value add that is a brand, it has much more return over the medium term than any doing just one campaign. Even if the campaign is really well brand aligned, I think that investing time, if you've got the bandwidth to do it, it creates much stickier clients and customers, and it just has much better traction, and it allows you to learn as much about your engaged audience over time as it does an initial campaign where it can be really scattergun and you really don't get as much traction. That's our personal view.
Yeah, and look, I can understand where marketers are coming from in this perspective, is because ROI and brand awareness, they've typically been problems with correlation, simply because it's like, for example, how do you directly attribute a lot of organic things, like the way that your brand is perceived, the way it's positioned, the way that the impact it has on the way that people make decisions. A lot of it is quite hard, and a lot of brands approach it in a very umbrella situation where it's like there's 15 initiatives that are raising brand awareness, and as a result, it's hard to sort of collate those and go, this is how much this per dollar. But I know that the digital world, and I'll throw to Mike in a second, I know the digital world does help us track a lot of things much better, but it still comes up with that translation issue, because it's like, how do we know how many organic posts it takes to convert a person? All those kind of things. I mean, Mike, from your experience as an action-oriented organization, what do you think about this?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because they're related. So even though we often kind of think that, brand awareness, it's either brand awareness or ROI. And yet brand awareness is so important for ROI. The challenge is that, we're all just so addicted these days, and that is very much due to digital, to recording and measuring everything and knowing, hey, every dollar I spend now generates an actual dollar return. We're also, I guess, privileged and lucky to have that, the ability to do that these days. Whereas in the past, that you couldn't. What was the old saying there? I know that 50% of my advertising is working for me. I just don't know which half.
Which percent? So would you say, Mike, that has made us lose sight of how to associate ROI with brand?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that, look, it's definitely a changing business dynamic anyways. gone are the days of thinking about that long-term investment for the way we would approach things. Everyone's looking for that quick win or looking for instant results and measurable results.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of pressure on marketing these days to say, you know, for every activity that you do, for every minute you spend, every dollar you spend, what are you getting back for it? And as far as we're concerned, if we don't see that, then that was a waste. And that's it's a real shame. It's a real challenge. We see this all the time when we're trying to deal with clients, where we can show that ROI and it's great. But we also need to think about the long term, because what ends up happening is, you know, we start off with a bit of a bang. You know, you get great results for the first 2-3 months, and everyone looks like heroes, and that's great. But then when you look at it over the long term, and I'm talking 12 months, 2 years, 3 years down the track, constantly hunting for that, you know, instant ROI kind of work that you do, you can only refine that so far before it all starts to become unraveled, where you kind of you hit a plateau quite quickly. Whereas if you are doing those activities that are brand building, brand awareness stuff, you've got the long-term benefits out of it. And I think that's where, you know, you see Kristen with all the branding work that they do, you know, that sets up a great position that then is reinforced with everything that you do. And so over the long term, you start to see that impacting on ROI. You don't see it straight away, but over the long term, you start.
Absolutely.
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, go, Ariel. Go.
Oh, I was just going to say, when it comes to video campaigns, you know, this is a topic that we have to cover quite intensely when we start a video campaign, because the metrics of a brand awareness video are success metrics are very different than the success metrics of a video made for ROI. So when we're doing a paid media marketing campaign with a client and usually working with a media agency, we always make sure we're aligned on that, because what we do for brand awareness videos is it's about the watch through rate and the brand impressions, the share impressions afterwards all the time for brand awareness, where for a ROI style video, it's about the click through and it's about getting to that next stage and having actionable, you know, seeing that actionable result happening. And it's very, very, very important that we always make sure that the client is very clear on what they're asking for, because when we create a brand awareness video, we are truly doing it for the awareness of the brand. And we add a lot of creativity, but we make sure it's really the essence and the feeling of that brand and the tone of voice of that brand. And so people can go away having a certain feeling about that brand and remembering that brand, which is a completely different point of view when we're trying to get ROI. And we can do just quick wins. We can try to just get some funny quips or certain stories out there.
Yeah.
Ariel,
I think that's
fascinating.
yeah. Look, and I think that's an important point with this. It's much about convincing the client and
yes,
the business as to the benefits of building their brand, because it's their objective at the outset that will then determine the type of work that, you know, all of us will do for them on any campaign. And it also determines how you measure success, because you certainly can't measure brand awareness success with the usual click metrics that you would, but you can have some really strong visible indicators that the campaign you're running on brand awareness is actually having a really positive impact. You know, you can look at the search volume that's around your brand. As Ariel says, if you're doing video campaigns, you can make sure that somebody's looking all the way through it. And I suppose it comes back to, you ask yourself the question, well, why would you even bother to do this? To me, it's intertwined, because the ROI comes back in the future. It's just a more extended return.
Yeah, it takes time.
So it takes longer time. But I think there's even stats out there that say that people buy from corporate and companies that they know. So how do they get to know you? If it can be an immediate impulse where you're just doing a campaign-driven activity versus a brand awareness one where you've already gone to the effort over a series of time of building somebody who's gotten to know your brand. They understand what the voice of your brand is. They understand your associations, and they really align with your brand. So that, to me, creates something that causes repeat purchase, not just a one-off impulse buy. So, and that may suggest where it's more valuable.
Yeah, and I mean, I have a case study I mean, of a current client that we were going to work with, that Mike actually was going to possibly be involved with as well, where they actually were having a lot of success in the sense of they were driving sales because they were paying so much money for SEO. However, because their only real marketing was these hyper targeted ROI style campaigns like SEO, people weren't coming back to them because no one knew who they were. So just because they were having success there, was it really truly success? Because they're spending so much money getting that client through the door, and then they weren't getting the repeat business they should have gotten because they didn't know who that brand was, what they stood for, and they didn't remember them for next time.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is essential to have brand awareness as part of your campaign, because we spend all this money getting clients into the door. And if you're not then keeping them there, you're having to attract new people every single time you do that ROI campaign, where the brand awareness can really help with that retention and that build. And it can help with the ROIs too, because if they see that ROI video, but they've already been aware of your brand, they trust it more to go to that next step.
And so that brings us, and that's great, Ariel. That was a really interesting case study there. So, which brings us to how to measure one and then the other. So, I in my business, I found that the way that we measure how much our brand and our brand awareness gives ROI is we actually use a middle ground stat with like a KPI. And so what we tend to do is we say, okay, so we've got our brand awareness campaigns, and then we put KPIs around those campaigns. We say, this is how much traction we want. This is what we want. This is what the leads we want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then what that does is then we leapfrog off that KPI to ROI, which means that what we do is we say, okay, based on historical figures, if we get one conversion, then this leads to this amount of leads. And then, so what we do is, with some creative maths in there, is that we link brand awareness to KPIs to ROI. And so that way we can see, and it's just one of many that you can use that I find works well, because just translating brand awareness to ROI is extremely hard. You need like this cascading mathematical formula. But what I find works well for us, that we just came over but naturally, was just saying, right, KPIs, that KPI leads to this. This is how we can equate the two. What does everyone else do here to measure, you know, ROI with brand awareness?
Yeah, look, I mean, there are lots of different metrics we can utilize when we're looking at, I guess, broader attribution. Yeah, it's an interesting one, because we're kind of going through, and I think we're going to be talking about this in another podcast, is looking at the sort of tracking abilities that we have at the moment, and what we will potentially have going forward with a lot of the different changes to iOS and future, particularly with Apple and privacy. So at the moment, we're fortunate, and we can do a whole bunch of attribution modeling and attribution for across different platforms. But going forward, it's going to start potentially go back to the old days, where we can see effectively what was always the last click kind of tracking. And that's all we can kind of really get, I guess, a quality score on for ROI.
Do you think that's enough? And sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm saying, like, where you said, because I know that there are certain limitations, like, let's not beat around the bush here. ROI and brand awareness are hard to measure. Do you feel like that gives you sufficient, like, connection there?
No.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to pick holes. I'm like just trying to say, like, you know, does that attribute go, okay, that's near enough, is good enough, and that works? Or is it something that you can actually use?
Well, that's an interesting one too, isn't it? Because when we look at the amount of time we can spend looking at data and trying to extrapolate what things are happening and kind of connect it together, and, you know, you can kind of get all those spreadsheets and mathematics kind of happening to sort of look at it. And don't get me wrong, I love that stuff.
Oh, I bet you do. I bet you do. If anyone could figure it out, it would be you.
We love sort of trying to work those sort of numbers out as such. And there are some pretty cool things that we can do. But I mean, the reality is you've got to always, with everything, and this is return on investment again, is you've got to look at the time and effort we spend trying to track and model this stuff and connect the dots on it and make a lot of assumptions around things. Is it worth the ROI of us spending the time and effort to try and do that? Or are we better off looking at other metrics within the activities that we do, and just know and trust in that will lead on to the other activities that we want to do. And so sort of, I guess, as Ariel was saying before, when you look at some of those higher level metrics or the earlier stage metrics that, you know, we sort of traditionally might call vanity metrics, when you look at the amount of impressions and stuff and engagement in a video or in the brand and posts and things that we do, traditionally we look at that and go, well, it's just a vanity metric, right? Until you get it to the very end, who cares? You know, it's going to be a sale. I think going forward, that'll change, where you actually can look at it and say, well, actually, no, that is a good thing. That is helping to build the brand identity, the awareness and positioning. And the old school days, back in my days at Nielsen and stuff, where you'd look at doing, you know, research and stuff, you know, you would actually sample the market and look at what were people's reactions and impressions. How did your, not just brand awareness in terms of your brand being out there, but what's the impression of your brand? And I forget who it was that sort of talks, who has a quote about your brand, which basically says that, you know, your brand is what people say when you're not in the room.
Jeff Bezos, Amazon.
Yes.
Jeff Bezos.
Right. Yeah. Kristen, anything about measuring before we wrap up? I think measuring is what we need to be sort of.
Yeah, look, everybody needs to be held accountable. At the end of the day, it's a financial decision to invest in this, isn't it? I think with brand awareness, when you start at the outset, you should really look over a longer term. So you don't do these as drop in and out campaigns. They are something that build customer awareness and customer engagement over time. So your measurement of that should reflect it. So you look at trends rather than immediate spikes in charts or anything like that. You're really trying to build that customer engagement score over a period of time, and that's what we focus on. And I'm sure does that align with what you encounter, Ariel?
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that I have to just state in here with this is that really 80% is the creative behind it. You can't just have brand awareness in the sense of, oh, I'm getting the brand out there, so it's going to work. You have to actually have the creativity alongside your brand awareness campaign. It needs to make an impact, or you're not going to make your customers aware. So it's not good enough just to throw it out there. You need to make sure that you are storytelling and being creative and being impactful, so that they are not only being made aware of your brand, but they remember your brand.
Yeah, and look, that just triggered me because I was sorry. because I, like, you know, when you hear on the radio, right, and you hear them, they go, "Hey, like this segment is brought to you by Acme Tires," and then they go, like, on with the segment. And when I'm driving, I always think, how did Acme Tire, like, they probably spent $10,000 on that or whatever it was. And I know that it's over time, but I always think, how would that have impacted? And I know in a general sense, it's just getting the name out there and all that. But I think further to Ariel's point is, it's not just getting your brand out there and hoping it sticks. It's like thinking about where your audience actually is and what messages are going to get their attention, because it's a busy, crowded market out there, and people only have a limited attention span. And so I just feel like further to Ariel's point is, it's not just going, hey, put my brand on that jersey and put that brand on that billboard and put that brand on this and that, because in the end, you need to think, okay, for the spend, which brings it back to ROI, is for the spend, where am I putting it, where my audience is actually seeing it and paying attention and absorbing that, even if that's where programmatic is so amazing. And that's where you don't have so much of that like spray and play approach, because programmatic allows you to be so much more targeted where your content is going, at least for a video standpoint. Because even though recently for a real estate company, we did a full creative ad brand awareness campaign for, we still only targeted certain types of individuals and certain types of shows to put that awareness campaign on, so that we were targeting the right people within that campaign. So, you know, how to get the best ROI, you know, you can actually use metrics to your to the best of your ability by being targeted with the audience that you're delivering your awareness to. Perfect. Well, we'll start to wrap up. Is there anything else anyone wants to contribute?
No, I'm good.
I think we did cover a lot there. So just remember, everyone, that look, brand awareness is important. Like, I mean, I took away main highlights were look at the metrics that relate, look at your audience, make sure you're producing creative content that really does engage and that spreads the right message about your brand. And know that it does take time, and that, yes, everyone has this difficulty with ROI measurement when it comes to it, but it is possible. And it's all about framing it correctly. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this podcast for the 4 marketers. And we will see you in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.